check out these bees. They are just going off today. Now it's the 19th of August and it's a couple of weeks short of the official start of spring, but it's a lovely sunny day, so I thought I might do this clip and just have a chat to you about swarming. Why bees swarm, how they do it, and how you can cash in on that and get some free bees. So why do they swarm? Well, it's the natural way that bees use to create more hives and repopulate the area. And there's a unique way that they do this. At the start of spring, the hive will start to generate a new queen cell. Now before that new queen hatches, the old queen will leave the hive with about half the population of bees and find somewhere else to take up residence. When you think about it, it's a really good way to do it. The new queen, when she hatches, will take about 3 or 4 days before she's mature and ready to mate. So she'll go on a few mating flights and then she'll come back to the hive. But then it'll be a few more days before she starts laying. So the whole process takes quite a few weeks. So it's much more sense for the old queen to leave the hive. She'll leave a population of bees behind. She'll leave a good store of pollen, honey, and also some brood and also some larvae, so that the hive can basically look after itself until the new queen's ready to start laying. So the old queen leaves the hive with half the bees' population. So she'll swarm off, and quite often at that point, that's when you see big masses of bees swarming around in the air. Everyone tends to get in a panic because they're not too sure what's going on. The interesting thing about bees when they swarm is that they tend to be very passive. Not only have they left the hive so they've got nothing to protect, but they gorge themselves on honey so they've got a good supply of food to last them, because they don't know when their next meal's going to come along. So when you're around a swarm of bees, they tend to be very passive and they're very unlikely to sting. They'll quite often go off maybe 1 or 2 kilometres from the original hive, and then they'll settle down and clump normally onto a branch, maybe a couple of metres off the ground, and they'll cluster around the queen to keep her warm, and they'll look after everyone. And then scout bees will start to go off and look for a new place to set up home. So the scout bees will go off and look for logs, hopefully not into chimneys and places around your house, until they find somewhere suitable. The scout bees then come back to the cluster of bees and let them know what they've found. So they'll do that by giving a little waggle dance, and they'll tell the cluster of bees where the new hive is, and they have a bit of a 5-star rating process to tell the other bees how good the new location is. So depending on how long they do the waggle dance for and how energetic they do it, that tells the bees that are in the cluster what they think of the new home and how good it is. So the more prolific the waggle, the more enthusiastic they are. That's when the bees in the cluster will decide, because they'll have a few different scout bees coming back with locations, they'll decide which location they think is the best. Then the hive, the clump of bees will get agitated, they'll take flight and they'll head off to the new location. And it's the scout bees that will fly through the swarm as the swarm's progressing in the direction of the new home. So it's the scout bees that tell the cluster of bees where to go. Now that's a really good opportunity if you want to cash in on the swarms that are around at the start of spring and get yourself some free bees. Also, if you know, if your friends and neighbours know that you're a beekeeper, you'll most probably get inundated with phone calls from people who are panicking because suddenly they've got a swarm of bees in their front yard and they're terrified of getting stung and they don't know what to do. So whether you're interested in catching swarms or not, chances are you're going to get quite a few phone calls at the start of spring with people panicking because they would want you to come and collect the bees and take them away. So how do you catch swarms? Well, you can set up a swarm trap. So let's go down the backyard where I've got some bits and pieces, and we'll have a look at how to set up a swarm trap, how to bait it, and where to put it. Okay, so you want to catch some free bees. Where to start? What you need is a box. Don't make it too small, otherwise the bees won't be interested in it. You want something that will be about 20 litres in capacity. I tend to work on about 5 frames worth, so you can go bigger, but you don't really need to because you're going to be putting it up somewhere high. You're going to be handling it a lot, so you don't want something too big and cumbersome, but you want it big enough that the bees are going to like it and want to move in. So I've got a 5-frame nuke box here. Tends to be a really good size. I've seen people use all sorts of things as swarm traps. Some people have used plastic flower pots that they've tied together and just drilled a hole in the end and used that. You can get some scrap bits of wood, make up your own small nuke box. You can really use anything. I've seen bees move into barbecues, Telstra pits, all sorts of places. As you know, if you've had bees move into your chimney or up under your eaves, sometimes they're not fussy, they'll just find anywhere that they think's half suitable. So start off with your box. You can put your box up and just put the lid on and just keep your fingers crossed and hope that a hive swarm of bees moves in, but you're going to have much greater chance of getting something if you bait the box. Now what people use is lemongrass oil. So you can buy some lemongrass oil from your local pharmacy or your local naturopath shop. Some people also use commercially made swarm lures. This one's called Swarm Commander. I've used this for a few years and it's really great stuff. The bees get very attracted to it very quickly. So what is this stuff? Basically it's lemongrass oil. Beautiful sweet smelling lemongrass smell, and the bees are attracted to this because it's very similar to the pheromone that the queen bee gives off. You can purchase this stuff, or even if you've got some lemongrass growing in your backyard, you can chop some up and put it in your box. So you don't have to buy some of this, but it's reasonably cheap. So I always think it's a good investment to have some of this. So all you really need to do is a few drops of this into the box. Just like that. It's all you need. Pop the lid back on. And then put the hive somewhere up reasonably high. The bees like it maybe about 2 metres off the ground. So find somewhere where you can pop it up, maybe on the top of a pergola, on the top of the shed, or even just on the rooftop if you've got a single-storey house. Quite often that's all you need. Give them a little bit of space because they're swarming, they take up a bit of space when there's all bees around, and just watch and see how it goes. Keep an eye on it. If you put it up on an eave, put the entrance somewhere where you can just stand back and you can easily see, rather than have to climb up on a ladder to see what's happening in the hive. One other tip, some people can use frames of old brood or old comb to also entice the bees in. It gives the pheromone that the queen bees had when you take those frames out of the hive, so that's a really good attractant for the bees as well. But just keep an eye on that sort of thing, because if the bees don't move in straight away, the wax moth will, and you might end up with a bit of a mess inside the box, and then the bees might decide they don't want to go there anyway. So I've put some lemongrass oil in this box. I'm going to pop it up on the shed, and then we'll see, keep an eye on it and just see whether there's any interest in the box over the next few days, weeks as we come into spring, and hopefully there's some swarms around that might decide to move in. It's that simple. Box is up on the roof. Now we'll just sit back and wait, keep fingers crossed, and hopefully in a few days or a few weeks we'll have a swarm. Just a couple of other tips worth mentioning about swarm traps. One is when you're baiting the swarm trap with the lemongrass oil, you want to replace it about every 4 or 5 days or every week, because the smell will dissipate after a while, so you need to be refreshing that on about a weekly basis just to keep enticing any swarms around that might want to go into the box. The other thing is, depending on what you use for your swarm trap, I prefer to use boxes that I can put frames in. That way, if a swarm does move in, I don't have to get to it straight away and move the bees out, because they've got existing frames and they can draw out the comb, and then when I want to move them into a bigger box, it's just a simple case of taking those frames out and putting it in a 10 frame box. If you've used something like flower pots, or you've made up your own smaller box that doesn't take frames, hint from experience, you need to get them out of that swarm box fairly promptly and get them into a box with frames, because they will start to draw out comb straight away. And when you take the lid off, or however you've put the thing together, you're going to have comb everywhere, and then it's quite a messy job to cut that comb out, put it into frames, and then move them into a box. So that's a couple of things to think about when you're doing your swarm traps. So good luck with it all.